Hello and welcome to another episode of Video Game Film School, the show that explores the connection between video games and the films that influence them. In this episode, I will discuss Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. After the commercial and critical success of Metal Gear Solid, a lot was expected of its inevitable sequel. The final product is something that fans to this day are still trying to wrap their heads around. Just like its predecessor, Metal Gear Solid 2 is heavily influenced by Kojima's love of cinema, which is evident in the gameplay mechanics, characters, story, music, style, and themes. A quick recap of the first game, considering many of Metal Gear Solid 2's core gameplay principles are the same in both titles. They feature the concept of one man infiltrating a base, distracting enemies, and trying to stay unnoticed. In a PlayStation 2 magazine article titled Kojima at the Movies, Kojima expressed that The Great Escape shaped the defining escaping from the enemy gameplay Metal Gear Solid is known for. Kojima has said that this goes hand in hand with building the tension you would feel from carefully sneaking around enemies. While the Guns of Navarone influenced another aspect of the sneaking gameplay, distracting and luring enemies away to infiltrate a base. The Guns of Navarone also influenced how satisfying it would feel carrying out and succeeding in a nearly impossible mission, which is coincidentally how Kojima felt while watching the movie. The concept of switching to first-person view to give the player a more personal perspective and a different angle when scouting out your surroundings was inspired by Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest. The film also influenced Metal Gear Solid's approach to climactic action scenes on top of large-scale set pieces like the rooftop of Federal Hall and the fight on Mount Rushmore in the film. The level design idea of a 3D maze composed of elevators and ducts was inspired by Dawn of the Dead. Kojima was motivated by Dawn of the Dead's depiction of fighting enemies scattered in a closed area while making maximum use of the structure of the building. Above all else, Metal Gear Solid is most compared to and inspired by the 007 series. Both series depict a spy infiltrating a base full of charismatic villains hell-bent on ruling the world with a secret weapon hidden inside a remote hideout. Kojima has also stated, without 007, there would be no Metal Gear Solid. The plot twist in Terminator 2, when it is revealed that Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator is the good guy, gave Kojima the inspiration to switch Snake for Raiden after the game's first act. Konami kept this a secret up until release by altering the game's promotional material. The twist sparked a lot of controversy with fans who were upset that they had been lied to by marketing, forced to play as annoying effeminate rookie with girl troubles Raiden over badass cool dude Solid Snake. Kojima's reasoning for the switch was to distract the player from Snake, giving them a more objective view, making him a more impressive figure. The duality doesn't stop there. Raiden and Snake represent two famous opposing movie monsters. Kojima said that Snake and Raiden represent Godzilla and King Kong respectively. Both Snake and Godzilla are government experiments gone wrong and represent the consequences of mankind meddling with science. Both Raiden and King Kong were kidnapped from their home, seduced by a woman, captured and dragged into New York City on top of a skyscraper. Raiden and Rose even have debates about King Kong and Godzilla throughout the game's codex. On the subject of Rose and Raiden, who I should mention's real name is Jack, their names derive from the two lovers from James Cameron's Titanic. The tankard sinking at the beginning of the game is also a reference to the film. Solid Snake is based off Snake Plissken from Escape from New York. The pair don't just share the same codename, but a similar attitude, look, gruff voice, and eventually in Metal Gear Solid 3, facial bandages. Metal Gear Solid 2 goes a step further, making Snake's other codename Iroquois Pliskin, driving home the fact that Kojima really loves Escape from New York. The plot of Metal Gear Solid 2 even borrows the story from Escape from New York. Both game and film follow both Snakes infiltrating a hostile environment tasked with saving the President of the United States. Escape from New York's sequel, Escape from LA, is basically a retelling of the original picture. Many of the same character types and plot beats are reused, such as Pliskin infiltrating another crime-ridden city to retrieve a target, as well as Snake getting captured and forced to fight for his life. Metal Gear Solid 2 has a very similar concept, as it rehashes characters and story beats from Metal Gear Solid 1. Familiar characters and plot lines reappear all throughout the game's story. the return of Cyborg Ninja, a familiar torture scene, and the weird squad of villains called Dead Cell, which mirrors Foxhound from MGS1, are just a few of the reused moments. At first, these similarities just seem to be a lazy retreading of the first game, but the payoff to these references comes at the game's climax, where it is revealed that Raiden isn't a simulated version of the Shadow Moses incident from MGS1, giving those callbacks significance. Metal Gear Solid 2 amped up the production quality of the game's cinematics and performances, creating a spectacle in line with famous Hollywood action flicks. Comparable to an actual film shoot, Kojima had people scout locations in New York to take sample pictures of landmarks they wanted to use in the game. Motion capture and a military consultant were used to recreate the movements of soldiers to make sure the soldier movements and techniques were as realistic as possible. Much of the game's cinematics borrow elements from iconic scenes of action and science fiction films. The opening tankard chapter is filled with subtle nods to some of Kojima's favorite movies. The opening of Ghost in the Shell is directly referenced in the opening cinematics as Snake jumps from the George Washington Bridge. Snake and the Major both perform a similar backwards dive off a building while wearing invisibility camouflage. When Snake drops into the tankard, an electric force surrounds him as he rises from a kneeling stance. This depicts the iconic scene of the T-800 arriving from the future in the opening of Terminator 2. The rest of the game alludes to aspects of many action films such as Heat, The Rock, Face Off, and Commando. Kojima has declared that Heat was the only Hollywood picture to portray gunfighting realistically, and he wanted to put that in the game. John Woo flicks were also a huge influence in Kojima's style. The showdown between Solidus and Raiden as doves fly around them, guns pointing at each other, is a nod to John Woo films such as Face Off. The 90s action classic The Rock has been compared to Metal Gear for its familiar plot and dynamics between the two main characters. Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage's relationship of badass soldier and fish out of water, and the banter between the two, has been compared to Snake and Otacons. The Rock also follows the same infiltration scenario of a man breaking into an impenetrable base run by a villain whose motives are more ambiguous. Solidus Snake, the main villain of Metal Gear Solid 2, has motivations that can be conceived as good. His main mission is to stop the Patriots, an all-seeing government entity that wants to keep control of the American population. Solidus Snake's character is comparable to Ed Harris's character in The Rock, who just wants the military to give compensation to his men and their families, whom he believes have been neglected by the US government. Metal Gear Solid 2 has been considered the first postmodern video game, and was set out to deconstruct video game culture and the nature of video game sequels, as well as the franchise itself. Metal Gear Solid 2's narrative is very meta and self-referential, oftentimes breaking the fourth wall. As you play, you are bombarded with codec calls, which were a criticism of Metal Gear Solid 1. You're also given bizarre scenarios such as Ocelot's possessed arm, as well as fourth wall breaking dialogue.
Infinite ammo.
MGS2 is in the same vein as Commando and The Last Action Hero, in that both are parodies of 80s action movies. Commando shared the same camp and over-the-top machismo that is evident in the Metal Gear Solid series. Stupidly badass names like John Matrix, along with insane Bulletstorm action, sprinkled in with that Arnold Schwarzenegger hand-fistedness, played with the tropes of action films of the era. The Last Action Hero went full satire with the story of a kid sucked into an Arnold Schwarzenegger film. The movie lampoons the tropes and cliches of the action genre, just as Metal Gear Solid 2 is a parody of itself, where Raiden is also sucked into a Metal Gear Solid 1 simulation. A lot of Metal Gear Solid's humor, some even unintentional, comes from its narrative satirical nature, as well as from inserting lighthearted and silly moments in an otherwise tense and serious military drama. Kojima has stated that the Pink Panther series was pivotal to the comedy of Metal Gear Solid, with its screwball humor during situations of extreme importance. Kojima has also declared that there is even a reference to another satirical spy comedy, Austin Powers, in one scene in the game. When creating the score for the game, Kojima wanted something that could sound like it belonged in a Hollywood action blockbuster. Kojima and his sound director decided upon Harry Gregson Williams after watching The Replacement Killers. Gregson Williams had a good resume of action movies under his belt and thought his music had perfect energy and really dug his use of synthesizers. When creating the score, Gregson Williams had to work backwards and produce the music for a scenario rather than seeing the action on screen, and working from there as he would on a film score. He would get notes on certain scenarios that the player might be involved in and come up with music that could be quickly changed out depending on the scenario. The themes of Metal Gear Solid 2 go beyond the anti-nuke and anti-technology motif of the first game. The abstract and perplexing final act covers many topics such as social engineering, political conspiracies, and the questions of what is real and what is fantasy. The original Planet of the Apes anti-nuke message served as the inspiration for the game's anti-war theme. The image of Charlton Heston on his knees screaming at a nuked-out Statue of Liberty made an impression on a young Kojima who grew up in the only country that has been devastated by nuclear warfare. Kojima has declared that 2001: A Space Odyssey is his favorite film of all time, and it shows in Metal Gear Solid's themes of humans creating technology that they cannot control. Metal Gear Solid's wacky and tonally unbalanced story has much in common with anime. Both share weird, eccentric characters, fighting mechs, and philosophy textbooks thrown at you at every turn. Two very famous anime films have had much influence on Metal Gear Solid 2. In Akira, a boy acquires telekinetic powers after interacting with a government-altered child. The boy, Tetsuo, becomes so powerful that he ends up engulfing the entire city of Neo-Tokyo in a blast all too familiar with a nuclear blast. This is in line with Kojima's anti-nuke and technology gone awry themes presented in the Metal Gear series. The other anime film, Ghost in the Shell, is about the exploration of human free will. The movie features augmented and artificial humans, which in turn raises questions such as what does it mean to be human, and explores the evolution of information. Both Metal Gear Solid 2 and Ghost in the Shell are set in a world where humans are becoming less and less human with the rise of body-altering technology, just like nanomachines in Metal Gear Solid. The line between human and computer is becoming thinner and thinner. The evolution of information is the main motivation for both the game and film's artificial antagonists. GW from Metal Gear Solid 2 and the Puppet Master from Ghost in the Shell are both artificially intelligent entities obsessed with the evolution of information. The Puppet Master wants this information to grow to a higher level of being, while the GW AI wants this information to control the American populace. The Matrix is also a major influencer, as the world you see in MGS2 eventually is revealed to be a simulation. The film plays with the notion that our world is a fabrication and we are all puppets inside a simulation. Raiden, after implementing a virus into GW, learns that the whole mission on Big Shell was a simulated version of the Shadow Moses incident. He was in a program to create another super soldier in line with Solid Snake, not unlike the program given to Neo to learn Kung Fu in the Matrix. Kojima had much love for the Matrix and has stated that a lot of the themes and action used in the film were in Metal Gear Solid 2. A lot of the action scenes, especially Vamp's ability to run up walls, were influenced by the film, as well as the green tint used in both the Matrix and Sons of Liberty to give a computer-simulated feel. The game takes a turn for the bizarre after Raiden implements the virus into GW and ascends into the bowels of Arsenal Gear. The music is haunting and sounds like a whale is screaming. The different sections of Arsenal Gear are named after body parts. This is Kojima taking inspiration from the film Pinocchio, wanting to give the player the feel of being digested by a giant whale. Inside Arsenal Gear, the Colonel and Rose, who have been your only outside contact throughout the game, start to malfunction and speak in nonsensical sentences.
I hear it's amazing when the famous purple stuffed worm in Flapjaw Space with the tuning fork does a raw blink on Harry Carey Rock. I need scissors. 61.
The ending has an uncanny surrealism reminiscent of David Lynch's work like Twin Peaks. Kojima has said in an Old Gamers Today article from 1999, "I would rather be a David Lynch than a Spielberg." Kojima, at least at the time of this interview, was more interested in giving the player a story that perplexed the audience with its subtext and complexity, rather than creating a mainstream Hollywood narrative. Twin Peaks is set in a sleepy mountain town struck by tragedy when Laura Palmer, a popular high school girl, turns up dead. Juxtaposed by the mundane lives of the townspeople, we are given bizarre events, prophetic dreams, and unsettling breaks in reality. The dive into the bowels of Arsenal Gear feels right at home with one of David Lynch's fever dreams as the world around Raiden starts to crumble. The evil underbelly of Metal Gear Solid 2 is the mass conspiracy festering within the American government. The US government is seen as a shadowy entity controlled by a group of faceless puppet masters called the Patriots. It is an intangible entity, yet at the same time a massive menace to the world. Kojima has said that the evil in the game was inspired by the government entity in the X-Files, whose cloak and dagger government has had a hand in every conspiracy from aliens to JFK. Another smaller reference to the show were the codenames used by Olga Erlukovich's cyborg ninja, Deep Throat and Mr. X, which are also the names of two characters in the X-Files who act as informants for FBI agent Fox Mulder. The last theme Kojima utilizes throughout MGS2 is deception. The story is told through a series of betrayals and sudden reversals to the point where the player is unable to tell fact from fiction. This concept of spy vs. spy is taken from the neo-noir film LA Confidential, which depicts a spy drama where you're not sure what is real and what is fiction. Kojima wanted to develop a game with a structure seen in the film by having characters lie or betray each other at least once. The final betrayal of Metal Gear Solid 2 was Kojima as he deceived Metal Gear fans with the game's marketing and his unconventional storytelling. Kojima took this with the advancement of technology and love of Hollywood films to create a product that is still analyzed to this day.